Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am Melissa, your host, and joining me today is Beth Burniche, and she is living with stage 4 breast cancer right now. She lives in North Carolina. She has a just turned 7-year-old son, Nathaniel, and she is a true crime lover, podcasts and TV shows, very similar to myself in some ways. And I am excited to have her share her story today. So welcome to the show, Beth.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
It is so great to have you here. So, and you also, so what is your favorite true crime podcast?
The podcast is called I Think Not. It's
Okay.
two people that are off of Broadway, and they kind of review different true crime shows. It's pretty funny.
Oh, very cool. And then do you have like a true crime TV show that you love to watch?
Well, currently I'm watching See No Evil.
See No Evil.
Yeah, it's got to do with it's cops using video surveillance to catch the bad guys.
Okay, very cool. I have not heard of that one. I will have to go check it out.
Yeah.
All right, Beth, so let's just dive in. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your diagnosis, when you were diagnosed, what was going on in your life when all of this happened?
Sure. So I was diagnosed in 2018. I'm actually coming up on my 6-year anniversary right now. And at the time, I had a 1-year-old son, or he was just about to turn one, sorry. And prior to my diagnosis, I was having a little bit of trouble breastfeeding. I kept thinking I was getting a clogged duct, so I kept doing stuff for that, and it felt like it was going away, and then it'd come back. But I was also having a lot of trouble with walking. I was using a cane. I was getting ready to start using a walker. I was really having, I couldn't even lift my son. My husband had to do all the lifting anytime we had to pick him up. My husband was starting to look into getting a nurse to take care of me, and the doctors had said that I had a pulled ligament, and so they sent me for physical therapy. And then one day I noticed that my breast looked really weird. It kind of looked like an orange, looked really pitted. And I said to my husband, this isn't right. I need to see a doctor. And so I called my OBGYN, and when I expressed what was happening, they were like, we want you in tomorrow. And as soon as my OBGYN saw my breast, she said to me and my husband, this does not look good. I think this might be cancer. I'm scheduling you for an emergency mammogram. And so they sent me for that. And unfortunately, the place I went to go get the mammogram just wasn't the best customer service, I guess I should say. The woman just, when I went for my follow-up, she just said, as if I would already know, she was like, oh yeah, it's cancer. And just said it like that. And I immediately burst into tears. Because of course you're hoping they're going to tell you it's nothing or it's something else that we can take care of. Now my OBGYN was great. She called me that afternoon and was like, I know you just got your diagnosis. I want to see how you're doing. Do you need anybody to talk to? Do you have any questions? I'm here for you. So even though that place wasn't great, my OBGYN was wonderful. She's like, we're already making calls. You're going to be getting a call from an oncologist probably this week, that sort of thing. So that was really good. So all I knew is that I had breast cancer. They hadn't yet done tests to find out what type of breast cancer, because there are multiple different types. Went for more testing and found out it was ER, PR positive, HER2 negative. And at the time they thought I was stage 2. But because I was having all this pain, my oncologist said, I really want you to go and get a bone scan and an MRI. And so they sent me for that, and those results came back, and that's when my oncologist let me know that it was actually stage 4, that all the pain I'd been having was cancer. And as I said, my son had just turned 1 at the time, and my literally first thought in my head when she said that was, I'm not going to get to see him go to kindergarten. Mm-hmm. And I think that made me cry worse than the diagnosis itself. And I'll just say he just finished first grade, and as you said at the start, he just turned 7 yesterday. So obviously, I that was a fear that didn't come to pass.
Oh, which is fantastic. So your cancer was also in your bone then, right? And
Yeah.
that's why you were having all of the issues
Yes.
as well. And so was there a specific kind of treatment that was done for that? Did they just treat the breast cancer? Tell me a little bit about
This
your treatment
was
protocol.
kind of both. And my doctor had told me, well, if you're going to have stage 4 in the bone is the best kind to have. It's the most treatable, and
Interesting.
everything. So for the breast cancer itself, they put me on Taxol, and I did 6 months of that. And my doctor explained, well, we only do 6 months because we find that that's usually about as much as the treatment, or I mean, the patient can withstand. But they're like, but also we don't want the cancer to become resistant to it. So we just
Okay.
do 6 months so that if sometime in the future we need to go back to it, we can go back and use Taxol again, that is still out there. Um, but in addition, I was getting, and I'm still getting, Xgeva shots, and Xgeva is a bone strengthener. And so that's because the cancer makes the bones look very pitted, kind of puts holes in the bones and everything like that. So I get an
Okay.
Xgeva shot um, to help strengthen that. But that, as a result, pulls a lot of calcium and vitamin D out of your body. So now I'm having to take a lot of calcium and vitamin D. I'm sure I'm not a lot of cancer patients will tell you that a lot of times it's like you're only on 1 or 2 medications for the cancer, but then you have like a whole pharmacy of medications you're on for the side effects.
Right. Plus
Yeah,
all the supplements that you need to take to offset all of that as well. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So obviously the calcium and vitamin D are also, kind of helping to strengthen the bone as
Yep.
well as, I'm sorry, what was the
It's
medication
called
that
Xgeva.
Xgeva. Okay. Um, and now that's not actually going to be able to get rid of the tumors. That's just trying to strengthen everything around it so the tumors have less of a detrimental effect. Is that kind of the thinking?
It's to help strengthen the bones so that they don't not as fragile and won't break as easily. And then the medication that I'm on right now, since I've been on since January, is called Orsudo, and it's kind of like a oral chemo.
Okay.
And the hope is with stage 4, the hope is at minimum that it'll keep the cancer stable, which means that the cancer doesn't necessarily go away, but it's not growing. The best outcome would be that it actually fights back the cancer and keeps it from not only keeps it from growing but kills it off. Um, I had my first set of scans, CT scans, and MRIs in April, and it just showed no change since December, which means that it looks like it's at least keeping it stable. My doctor did say it'll take a year before we really know for sure if it's working, but that if the scans at least show no change, that's a positive.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And how often are you having the scans?
It'll be every 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Yep.
And then after a year and there's no change, do you just stay on what you're on or can you back off or what is the
No,
protocol for that?
I'll be staying on it. It's just that we know it's working, so it's
Okay.
just kind of giving us some positive, as opposed to if it's not working, then obviously we need to change my
Right.
medication. Um, but I will, because I'm stage 4, I will still keep getting scans every 3 to 4 months because we did step it out at one point and then saw my cancer growing, and so just to be cautious, we pulled it back to 3 to 4 months.
Okay. And then did you have any treatment or therapies to your breasts or did they just really focus on the bone?
Yeah, so I had a a mastectomy on my right breast,
Okay.
which in itself is a big deal because for stage 4s, they don't usually do mastectomies just because they found it doesn't change the outcome or the prognosis at all. But I really just felt for myself, I wanted it gone. I didn't want that cancer sitting in me.
Right.
And so after I had been doing really well for over a year after the Taxol had ended. I was on treatments, but I wasn't on the Taxol anymore. And so my doctor approved me to get the mastectomy. So I had that done in 2019, the end of 2019. Um, And so I have a fake boob that I wear, and all the special bathing suits and special bras and everything that go with that, which thankfully, not the bathing suits, but the bras and the prosthetic are all covered by my insurance. So that's at least good.
Oh, that's
Those could
fantastic.
be really expensive otherwise.
Right. And so how are you feeling today? I mean, I know you're on the medication, but is the bone issues, like, are they affecting your daily life, or do you have good days, bad days? Like, talk
I have
about a
good
little bit
days,
about that.
bad days, but they do affect my life. I had in 2021, no, 2022, sorry. Forgot what year it was.
That's okay.
2022, I actually broke my right hip, and that was directly because of the cancer. My oncologist said where it broke was right where there was a tumor.
Okay.
Um, and so even though that's healed, I still have scar tissue in the muscle. So walking isn't painful, but it's difficult. And if I do walk too long, then it does start hurting. So I can't do long walks. Um, I had earlier this year what they call a fracture on my left hip, which isn't what we think of as a fracture of the bone breaking, but it was the ligament tore away from the bone. It's now healed. It was something self healing. That sounds awful when you hear it, but my orthopedist assured me that it would heal on its own. It took about 6 weeks, and I was doing physical therapy for it. Um, so it feels better now, but for, I would say, 2 months, I was in a lot of pain, having to take pain medications for it. So it does affect my ability. If I have somewhere where I know I'm going to be walking a lot, like for example, Halloween when we go with my son, or if we go to the zoo or something like that, I need to either bring a cane or a wheelchair. Because
Okay.
again, I can walk, but if it's a long distance and I don't have those devices, I'll be in a lot of pain that day.
Okay.
Um,
So are the tumors mostly in your legs and your hips, I'm
Yep,
assuming?
they're in my hips, in my ribs, which don't bother me at all. They're in my spine, which I've had a couple times where those bothered me, and we did radiation. Because again, with stage 4, um, depending on where your cancer is, whereas in my case, it's in a lot of spots. So they don't do radiation because there's just too many areas for them to cover. But when I have times where I have extreme pain, like I've had twice with my back, they'll go in and do radiation then because that will relieve the pain.
Okay.
So I've had that. And then I have 1 or 2 spots in my skull as well. Um, but really, it's been the one in my hips that have affected me the most as far as pain or difficulty being able to do things.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, and sometimes when something happens, I'm like, okay, is it because I'm almost 50, or is it because of the cancer? Or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah. Sometimes as we get older, we just have aches and pains.
Exactly.
But having stage 4 cancer, just a normal, like what would be a normal ache and pain for somebody else becomes a whole thing. And,
Exactly.
and you're grateful when you find out that it's just a normal ache and pain.
Exactly. I had pain in my back last year that was really hurting me, and we did a bunch of tests and everything, and it turned out to be arthritis. And I'm like, yay, arthritis!
Something 10 years ago you never thought you would be cheering, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So tell me a little bit about, like, how your son is doing. I mean, so basically your son has only ever known
Yeah,
really mom with cancer.
exactly. The only treatment I had that I lost my hair was the Taxol. We started that right after he turned 1. So by the time he was like 2, where he'd really be aware of anything, my
Mhm.
hair was already growing back. So except for pictures, he's never seen me without hair.
Okay.
And like you said, he's only ever known mom with cancer. So I think he's doing well with it because, unlike with other patients, it wasn't a change of life for him. It wasn't mom was healthy and now mom's sick. It's always been mom sick. And he knows what cancer is. He knows that mom's cancer is not curable. So mom will always have this cancer. But he does not know that it's terminal because at 7, I don't feel like he's mature enough to understand that that doesn't mean I'm going to die tomorrow.
Gotcha.
And so I don't really want to put that fear in him until he's a little bit older to understand that sort of stuff. And he's in a support group for kids who's parents have cancer. So I think he's learned a lot from that too, about what cancer is. He'll repeat stuff to me that I know he learned in group about cancer, that sort of thing. So,
Oh, that's wonderful. And
yeah.
I'm assuming they don't really talk about cancer being terminal in
No,
the group
because
and
not
stuff
all of
either.
them are, a couple of them have parents that are stage 4, but not all of them. Some of them, their parents aren't even in treatment anymore. Um, but it was still something they went through. So the idea is that the kids can be in the support group either until they're 18 or until they need it.
Okay. Oh, that's wonderful.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't really think about, I mean, when you're the patient, you think about yourself and your own support groups and, and things like that, but you don't necessarily think about, oh my gosh, my kid needs people that he can talk to as well. I didn't even know there were support groups for kids, so that's
Exactly.
fantastic.
The same for my husband. And I think helps our neighbor that he's friends with. He and his ex-wife were still very good friends, even though they weren't together anymore. And she had cancer, and she unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. But he's had this person that he can talk to who gets it completely because he's been through it. Because even though they weren't married anymore, he was still helping his ex-wife. Still being her support system and everything. They were best friends, and so yeah, it affects me, but it's affecting my family too. So they
Right.
need people they can talk to.
And a lot of times with men, they're like, I just have to keep going and I have to do all of the
Exactly.
things and stuff, and they don't necessarily even get people or opportunities to express what they're going through.
Exactly.
Because it's, when I was going through my cancer, and mine was, a much shorter period, but like my husband said, he only had one friend who would reach out and ask him how he was doing. A lot of people reached out, asked how I was doing, but he just was so grateful for this one friend who would reach out and be like, hey, how are you doing with all of this?
That is
Because
so,
caregivers get forgotten.
yeah, that is so true. So true. And I know in the case of my husband, he does, I would say like 75% of the parenting. He does almost all of the housework, just because my energy level, either I physically can't do things or I just don't have the energy to do more than like the dishes on a particular day or throw a load of laundry in. So he does so much. And yes, he's actually said to me before how sometimes it hurts that people don't ask him, how's he doing? Um, Especially, people that should know better. And so, yeah, it's nice that he has somebody he can talk to, because I think everybody needs that, whether they
Absolutely.
realize it or not.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about like living with stage 4 cancer. We tend to think of cancer as either, okay, you get diagnosed, you do your treatments, and then you're cured or you're in remission or whatever, and then life goes on. Or, okay, I have stage 4 cancer, treatments aren't working, and then people pass. But there is a whole thing in between about people who are actually living with stage 4 cancer.
Yeah, and it's very fascinating. I'm in support groups specifically for stage 4, and they are finding, because people are living so much longer, they don't have data on the drugs for that long. Like they maybe have treatment data on the drugs for, this is what you can expect at 3 years or 4 years, but they have no clue at 10 years what side effects or what issues you're going to have with the drug, because they didn't test them for that amount of time. And we're finding that uh, with stage 4, they're able to treat it more like a chronic disease than let's just make you comfortable because the end is coming. Unfortunately, it does eventually get to the point where the end is coming, because you get to the point where there's no more drugs to try. But right now, for me with stage 4, I would find that it really reprioritizes things for you. Things that were a big deal before suddenly are not a big deal. My husband and I tend to just not stress the small stuff at all, because it's just like, it's just not worth it. It's just a little thing, it'll go. Um, we go traveling a lot. We go on family vacations, at least 2 a year, which is something that even when we were single, I don't think we traveled quite that much.
Mm-hmm.
But we decided after I got diagnosed that we were going to stop as financially as much as we could, not put things off, not say we'll go do that someday, but instead, if we could afford it, let's just go do it, whatever that thing happens to be. Um, because we just don't know what tomorrow will bring. Like, I'm doing well right now. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I seem to be responding well to my medication, that sort of thing. But unfortunately, with cancer, it can change on a dime. Even though my last scans were good, they're only good till my next scans. Uh, so I think, like I said, I think it just changes your outlook on stuff and what you decide to get upset about or let ruin your day, that sort of thing.
Right.
So I feel like that was a huge change. I feel like as a parent, it's sometimes difficult because I try and think, like, what's it going to be like for my son when I'm not here? And while I hope I'm going to be here another couple decades, I also know, what the odds are. And so even though I try not to focus on that, I do try and, like, maybe my son gets a little spoiled. We do extra stuff with him, but I feel like I want to leave him with some memories, not just, you know, I just want him to have memories of the good things mom did with him, So, like, last year I brought him to a circus and spent way too much money. It was so expensive, but it was a fun mom and me day out. My husband stayed home and it was just something me and my son did. And he got spoiled. Everything he wanted, he got. He wanted a snack. Fine, he got some popcorn. He wanted a little toy they were selling. He got that. He wanted to go on the bouncy house. I just kind of let him do all the stuff he wanted to do. And he doesn't get that all the time, but I do try and have, like, some special days where it's like, you're kind of king for the day. What do you want to do? And
I mean, that's not spoiling your kid. That's just giving him a great experience
exactly.
and wonderful memories that he'll always hold.
Yeah, and that's what I want to leave him with. I have twice a year we get family photos, not necessarily formal photos, but I have a photographer that'll come twice a year and just take some photos of us. Because again, I want to make sure there's plenty of photos of me left behind. I want to make sure there's things to look at. I'm grateful now that my son has gotten to the stage where I know he'll remember me. That was a fear of mine for the first couple of years, is he going to remember me because he's so young, or am I just going to be that lady that's in pictures that everybody tells him about? So I'm very grateful now that I'm at that stage with him. But yeah, it affects your day to day, and then physically it affects you. So many people with stage 4 cancer become disabled in some way or form. We talked about side effects of medication. So from the Taxol, I still have brain fog where I forget words. Sometimes I'll be trying to talk to somebody and I can't think of the word I'm trying to use, or I forget something that maybe even just happened, 10 minutes ago. I mean, there's oftentimes I'll say to my husband, I'm sorry if I just said this to you, I don't remember, but, such and such. And
Chemo brain is real.
yeah, exactly. And so even though I'm about 5.5 years past chemo, or past that chemo, I still have the chemo brain from it. That's the big reason why I don't work. I was a project manager for years and got to the point where I couldn't remember how to do my job. And I had a great boss and everything like that. They really tried to work with me, but it just got to the point that I just couldn't do it anymore. And then, as mentioned, physically, like, I can't walk very far because my bones are more fragile than most people. I don't ride bikes anymore. I don't go ice skating or anything that there's a risk of a fall. I try to avoid because my bone is so much easier that it could break. And it affects things we want to do too. Like, my son is dying to go to Disney World. He really wants to go. And I'd love to make it happen, but at the same time I'm thinking, will I be able to handle it, physically? Am I going to be able to walk around? Or is my husband going to have to push me in a wheelchair the whole time? Or, how are we going to do that? So it affects decisions on how, you got to plan ahead for things that you didn't necessarily have to do before.
Well, you seem to, in spite of all of that, you have a very positive outlook on life and the future, and, you think about preparing
Yep.
for when you're no longer here. But I mean, honestly, I could walk out my door and get hit by a car, tomorrow, and it's the
Well,
same kind of, it's the same conclusion. So what do you do to keep, to keep your spirits up, to keep that positivity, to, keep looking toward the future?
well, when I first got diagnosed, I cried. I think I cried for a solid week. I was
Well, we all do.
devastated. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And even if you're not stage 4, you still cry because it's a stressor, and it's not what you had planned for your life right there. Yeah, I didn't plan for cancer. What's this? This is disrupting stuff. And then one day I just looked in the mirror and said to myself, you can either keep feeling sorry for yourself or you can fight. And so I decided I was going to fight it, and started reading up on cancer, started getting different books, talking about caregivers. Um, and I know I'm generalizing here, but men like to help. They want to fix things.
Right.
And so I think my husband at the start felt very helpless because this is not something, cancer's not something he could fix.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't help me. He could, hold my hand, give me hugs and stuff, but he couldn't really fix it. And so, one of the first things I did is I told him, I want you to research what alternative treatments are out there. I'm going to do the chemo. I trust in the Western medicine, but I want to know what else is there out there I can do. And we researched stuff that had to do with like meditation, some supplements, that sort of thing. And when he'd find something, because he already has a history of, he teaches a martial art that's an energy art. He's really into what you eat, which for me is sometimes annoying because it's like, I want ice cream. What do you mean you're not going to eat ice cream? No, I want to eat ice cream now. So it's nice to have my son there. Now he'll have dessert with me at least. But so I trusted if he brought me something and said, I think this is worth a read, that he had kind of vetted it already. And so in doing that and reading stuff, I found that they found that stress itself could feed the cancer, because stress affects your body. It weakens your immune system. Mm-hmm. That's why a lot of times if you are very stressed, you get a cold. Mm-hmm. And so obviously a weakened immune system when you're fighting cancer is not so great. So I just decided, I'm not gonna be stressed about this. Doesn't mean I'm not concerned. Doesn't mean I don't have days that I do cry or get upset, but it's not gonna be the focus. I'm not gonna let it stress me out. I had a big discussion with my extended family about that. I'm not going to tolerate, arguing in my house and, people stressing me out, that it just wasn't good for me and that I had to be selfish and think of myself right now. So I think it was just a mindset. In talking about support groups, it took me a while to find the couple support groups I have. I had joined other stage 4 groups that people were just so negative. And by negative, I don't mean worrying about dying or, sad about having cancer. That's normal. That is a total normal reaction.
Right.
But I mean just negative about the drug companies are trying to kill us. Society is trying to kill us. Stuff like that, that it's like, that doesn't help anybody, And
you don't need that in your life.
Exactly. So I would leave those groups. And I finally found the groups now. But I just had to make a conscious decision of, what I'm going to let stress me out, what I'm not going to let stress me out. I stopped watching the news. I try and stay appraised of what's going on in the world, but I realized when I'd watched the news, by the time the news was over, I was feeling very sad and depressed, which is probably a reaction to what's going on in the world. It's not like everything's sunshine and roses. Why are you? Right. But I just thought about it and said, that's energy I really can't afford to give right now. So I think it's a very conscious effort. I have to really think about what media I'm taking in, what, who I'm surrounding myself with, that sort of thing.
So how do true crime podcasts and shows fit into all that?
I really don't know. I'm trying to think when I got into that. I think I was searching around for podcasts and I found one called A Date with Dateline. And I didn't even watch Dateline, but I started watching it because of that podcast, because they just made it sound so fun. They were, And then from there, it just kind of snowballed. I started watching different shows and then started listening to different podcasts, that sort of thing. And so that, talking about being a mom. So those are all things I cannot ingest when my son's around. So like today he's at camp. So up until, we met today, I was watching some stuff. So
But
I, yeah, so
it
I
gives
don't know.
you pleasure, it gives you
Yep.
joy. It's not draining your energy, even if it is kind of
No, and
not
I
the
feel like
best kind of stuff. But
yeah, but I feel like it does make me more self-aware of like my surroundings when I go out, that sort of thing. Of
okay,
being aware of who's around me at any given time.
of
Not
course.
being paranoid, but just being more aware.
Hey, that's the biggest thing to avert crime is just to be aware of your surroundings and
Exactly.
not get into things that you shouldn't get into.
Yeah, that too.
um, okay, so like, what are you doing today? Like, what we've really talked about how your life has changed, obviously, but like, are there things that you're doing today that you probably would not have had cancer not be come into your life?
Yeah, so I do have a lot more free time now, but since I am not working. Um, so today was my son's first day at camp, so I was able to take him, and I'm able to pick him up from camp. So those are things I would not have been able to do had I still been working a job.
More
Probably would have,
quality time with him.
exactly, probably would have had to organize with my husband. Okay, you bring him in the morning, I'll pick him up in the afternoon, or something like that. Instead, we're
Mhm.
both able to bring him. Um, I'm able to get some stuff done during the day, like I mentioned, laundry and some dishes and things, so that when he gets home, I have more time to be able to focus on him, as opposed to I'd been working all day, so now in the evening is when I have to get all those chores done, that sort of thing. I get to go out and have lunch every day with my husband because he works from home.
Aw.
Yeah, so that's something I would not get to do if it wasn't for cancer. I mentioned that we travel. We're really into cruises, and it works out well with us having a 7-year-old because they have a kids club. So we also get some downtime, and he likes going to the kids club. But because of cruises, we're getting to go to different countries that I've never been to before, or different locations. So that's all stuff I wasn't necessarily getting to do before cancer. I had done some travel, but not to the extent that we're doing it now. Um, I feel like I have more time to learn stuff. So, like I mentioned, I'm learning how to crochet. I don't know that I would have had the time to do that had I been working. Because when you're working, it's 40 hours, but then there's also a commute time.
Right.
And then it's like the second you get home, okay, now you're go, 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 because you got to start preparing dinner, or you got to do whatever else. And all of a sudden it's bedtime for the kid, and then it's bedtime for you, and you don't have any time to actually do something for yourself. So I feel like, um, in some ways, cancer has benefited me, has given me more time with my family, more time for myself to do things I would enjoy. Um, so it's
That's
not all
wonderful.
negative.
Yeah. So I always like to ask all of my guests, what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who is just starting on this journey or even in the midst of, stage 4 cancer? What's the one thing that they should know?
I would say stay off of Google. That is like, and that's advice I've gotten from support groups. Is Google will scare you because you not being a doctor and not being with other people that have been through this won't understand the information you're taking in, and you'll kind of scare yourself because you'll see statistics that don't necessarily apply to you. You'll see negative stuff about some of the treatments, but not the positive. I would say a much better resource is finding a support group that works for you. There's support groups for all sorts of people. There's support groups for young cancer patients. There's support groups for older cancer patients. There's support groups for parents. There's support groups for African American. Whatever it is that you feel defines you. There's a support group for it. And I found I learned a lot more about cancer and about my cancer from the support group than I did from anywhere else, even from my doctor. And I have a wonderful doctor. Um,
Well, because they've all been through it, so they
exactly.
or are going through it.
And they have the knowledge. And so I find that that's a much better place to get information from than Google, because like you just said, they've been through it, so they can give you information based on experiences, as opposed to just some person that wrote an article that might have skew on it.
And if you have a spouse who likes to fix things, that could be a great use of their time, because they can feel like they're helping by weeding through all of that negativity research and finding the right things.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And the other thing is, don't beat yourself up if what you're doing is different than what other people are doing, because everybody's cancer journey is different. And we're all doing the best we can. We're all making the best decisions we can for ourselves. And just because your decision is different than somebody else's doesn't mean it's wrong.
Exactly. Oh, that's perfect. Yeah. I love that, because everybody's journey is their own. And, I also like to say, don't necessarily give advice to people about what they should do, because you're not in their shoes. And ultimately, we all need to make the decisions for our health that are the best for us.
Yeah, exactly. I've learned if somebody on our group is asking for advice, I don't say, here's what you should do, or here's what I think you should do, or anything. I say, here's what I've done, or here's what I found, and then I'm sharing my experience, but I'm not telling them that they necessarily need to do that same thing.
Right. That's perfect. I love that. I do too. I say, like, here's my experience, but in the end, you need to make the choice that's going to work best for you and for the people around you.
Exactly. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for this. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. This is great information for people who may be facing a stage 4 diagnosis. And, it's not necessarily a death sentence that people can live for years. With this is more of a chronic disease than a terminal diagnosis. Yes. So I really appreciate you sharing all of that. And I know that these words are going to help other people.
Well, thank you so much for letting me share my story. And like you said, I personally have met people that are decades out from a stage 4 diagnosis. So it is possible. I know it's possible. I hope it's possible.
And that's great hope for people out there. So I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.